What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick Betts from the AWS On Air team. I'm joined here by one of my close friends over at Brightspot. Lee, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey, sure thing. Hey there, I'm Lee Teague, SVP of Engineering at Brightspot. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Brightspot, our CMS that really just takes your digital presence to new heights. We seamlessly align your technology approach and content strategy and empower you to create your digital experience. So today I'm going to demonstrate why developers are raving about our system.
Yeah, everybody, Lee and I have been talking backstage here for about 20 minutes. He's been telling me so much interesting stuff. I can't wait to share it all with you. Lee, one of the things that instantly shot out to me is you were kind of giving me the overall value prop of Brightspot overall, right? Kind of what differentiates you from some other similar products out there. Can you tell everybody what you were kind of telling me?
Sure. I mean, I think there's so many things. There's a lot of things, and I don't want to just kind of rattle off a list. But today I want to focus on what the developer experience is like. Because a lot of most content management systems do require some amount of customization, and the customization is really my department's specialty. So I'm here to just talk to you a little bit about that.
Perfect. Yeah, and you were telling me too, something that everybody runs into, and I think a lot of developers can relate to, right, is your system really lets people focus on their specialty, right? So you're saying front end people can focus on front end, back end can focus on back end. Kind of what does that mean?
Yeah, sure. So, when we're thinking about learning to become a developer for Brightspot, you really do kind of separate the back end and the front end. The back end developers are it's a Java platform, so back end developers are going to need to learn Java. We use MySQL and Solr on the back end, so some familiarity with SQL queries and Solr queries is certainly going to help. Although we do abstract those queries in the Brightspot query language, but for the front end, we've really taken the approach of saying, okay, this is where a majority of your customizations are going to be. So we really want to focus on making that front end experience something that you can hit the ground running really on day one and use the skills that you already have.
That's awesome. So it really lets people just focus on what they know and love and kind of takes off some of that stuff that maybe we aren't great fans of, like me answering emails on Friday afternoon. If I could have somebody do that for me, I'd be all for it. So it sounds super cool. I can't wait to dive into this more. I know that you've got some stuff prepared to show our audience. So why don't we just jump right into that? Um,
Sure.
all this stuff you've been telling me sounds great. Can you kind of get into what skills are actually required to be a Brightspot developer? What skills are required to use this system?
Sure. As I mentioned on the back end, Java is required. Although our typical a typical implementation in Brightspot really is fairly straightforward Java. Brightspot does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. So you're dealing with POJOs more than anything, right? A plain old Java object. That is,
I'm
you
going to
know,
start using
you
that
you
term everyday conversation, by the way. I love it.
plain old Java object. So uh, if you can put together a couple of private fields on an object, then you have an edit form.
Mhm.
That's all you really have to do is create a class, add some fields. Now you have an edit form in the CMS, and you just expand from there and grow from there. But today, what I wanted to show you is the front end development tool. So as I mentioned, we've broken that out into a completely different tool that we call Brightspot Style Guide. It's a Node.js application. You can run it on the command line, and you have a browser. You open your browser, and you're able to preview all of the components that you're building as you're customizing the front end of your website.
That's awesome. I gotta say, it looks pretty intuitive too. I love the photo, by the way, too. Being a Pacific Northwest guy, I feel like I see that every time I go on a hike these days. But let's kind of walk through what we're looking at here.
Sure. So along the left-hand side, we have all of our. It's a style guide, right? So first
Uh,
and foremost, you're going to have your styles. You'll have your main colors, your typography, any kind of buttons and interactions that you may need to build the site and use these components, reuse them all over the place in the site. But then we start getting into bigger building blocks.
okay.
Here's an example. Here's a carousel list. All right, and this is just and it's fully interactive. It's a list of, we've got lorem ipsum content in here, of course, right now, because this is a
For a second,
development
I thought I
environment.
was just not knowing a language, so that's comforting.
So a developer would use this tool to preview their work. So in one screen, they're going to have their handlebars files, their JavaScript, their less or Sass or CSS or whatever styling that, post CSS, you know, styling language that they're using. Usually, ultimately is CSS, and then a JSON file that really links the mock content into that handlebars file. So an example, I can pull up this JSON here and just show you. I mean, there's kind of a lot, but a developer would use this to say, look, I just want to preview some words here, right? And now we'll just see some words, and they can use that to as the alt text on this image. In this case, we're going to reuse this image file, so we're just going to bring in this image, and that'll be an image.hbs that's brought into this file to represent this image here. So as the developer is editing these JSON files to represent the kind of pretend content, they're also editing the handlebars in the JavaScript to really build out the structure of the site.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I got to say, looking through this, it gets me really excited. As somebody that's used a lot of different CMSs to build out web pages, first off, the fact that y'all have separated the front end and back end is just absolutely marvelous, because going back and forth was always just the worst part of the job. And like I said, it looks so user friendly, and so kind of intuitive to go through these lists on the side and figure out exactly what you want to be looking at. So really, really like this so far. So I know, kind of looking at a real world application, right? Because I know a lot of our audiences may have small businesses or large businesses and kind of like these examples. If I'm a business owner kind of looking at Brightspot, how can I leverage it to support my changing business needs and strategy?
Sure. The first thing that you really need to consider when looking at a CMS, particularly Brightspot, is what kind of content am I looking to put into this system, right? What kind of content do I want to manage? If you have a blog, then the answer is you have a blog post that you need to manage, right? You have multiple blog posts, and you're gonna want to build specific behavior and styling around a blog post, and how that blog post rolls up to a blog, and the blog post has an author and a byline and all those things. That's all code. So you can model those things out and build out exactly what you're looking for in terms of your content requirements. Another thing that you would want to think about is, what data do you have already? If you're a business owner and you're serious about your content, then you have content already. So we would need to think about what format is this existing content in, this legacy content, and how do we transform that to load that into Brightspot? And do we need to make changes to Brightspot in order to accommodate all of that existing content? The answer is almost always yes. So we've optimized our workflows to accommodate those changes.
That's awesome. What are some of the other use cases, kind of just off the top of your head, that are common that people might use Brightspot for and find that their lives are way easier having adopted Brightspot for? You mentioned blog there. Like, what are some other ones that you guys had in mind as you're designing this?
Another very common use case is images and video, or
Okay.
images and video. So a lot of times you'll see other content management systems, you may need a separate DAM or a digital asset manager. With Brightspot, you kind of have that built in. So you're able to upload videos, upload images, upload audio files. If you happen to be running an audio podcast or something like that, then we can accommodate all of those different asset types in Brightspot.
Wow. So it doesn't only kind of differentiate front end and back end, it actually lessens the number of things you got to look at as you're designing all of this as well. So not having that separate DAM would be fantastic.
Absolutely. And we can integrate with other systems too. So I think
Really?
we'll
Okay.
touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. So, if if we are looking at managing different systems and kind of seamlessly consolidating them, how would we go about that as a business?
Well, the first thing to consider is, what's your source of truth, or your system of record. Suppose you have YouTube as your system of record. Your video production team is uploading all of their videos to YouTube. They like that workflow. They're not going to change. They don't care about what your CMS is. They just want to continue uploading videos to YouTube. That's fine. They can do that. We can work around that, right? So in Brightspot, we would then configure the Brightspot YouTube federated search to connect to YouTube, perform an index of all of the content that is in your YouTube account, and if you wanted to publish that one of those videos on your homepage or feature it in a blog post or any way that you want to manage that content, you have it right there available to you in Brightspot without having to leave Brightspot, go to YouTube, find the video ID, come back to Brightspot, post it in the right field, the form element. You're not doing that. You're just doing a search in Brightspot, which is the most natural thing that you can do as a user of the CMS.
That's awesome. I think that's a big value proposition for a lot of customers too, is that ability to kind of integrate these disparate systems, right? So you talked about that video example. Sounds like based on what you've been telling us so far, you could upload them directly to it, or if you have that existing external system or workflow that your team wants to stick to, you can just integrate that as well. Besides videos, because I know we always get a lot of comments like, what are some other use cases? Like what are some other things you can think of for our customers that, some other common uses of we can actually just make this more seamless and connect these two systems, right? So videos is a big one. The dam was a big one. Are there any others that come to mind?
Well, since we're on the topic of customization, I can tell you that a few of our customers have integrated with sports score providers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for lots of different sports too, and it's very complicated. The data model of your favorite sports is actually pretty complicated, believe it or not. But we decided that for this customer, it made sense to keep them in Brightspot and not worry about copying and pasting all of the different scores every, the score can change every 30 seconds. You don't want a human being going back and forth and trying to paste in the score and then go look up the score and then paste in the score. You want to just integrate that with a back-end system. So in this case, we created a very rich model of lots of different sports and modeled that in Brightspot, created the synchronization tasks so that we're downloading that data from the remote system, indexing it, making it available to present on the front end, and then we built a pretty nice looking front end on top of it.
Yeah, that's a really cool use case. I wasn't even expecting that one. I like that you brought it back to sports too, always a big conversation for me. We won't talk about the Broncos right now, but, always love talking about the sports integration. Something that kind of, it's a little bit off, we haven't discussed this yet before the show, but you're talking about how easy and kind of intuitive it is and all these different things you can do with Brightspot. If I'm kind of a beginner developer and I want to learn all this stuff and I want to kind of start from scratch, personally, I would have loved to have a system that seamlessly integrated all of this to learn on. But like for some of the beginners that may be watching, kind of what would you start with at Brightspot? Like what are some of the first things that you would kind of play around with in your system and get affiliated with?
Sure. Number one is data modeling. I mentioned this earlier, but POJOs, right? You're just working with, we work with plain old Java objects. So as long as, if you know enough Java to create a class and extend a specific, an abstract class that we have that we'll supply in our training and documentation, then you can build a Brightspot content type. And once you build a content type, that's really the core building block for every other thing that you're going to do in Brightspot. It enables automatic serialization and persistence in the database. It enables the content form that editors can interact with to create new instances of this record. It enables you to search and other rich behaviors that just build on top of that. But the number one thing is getting that data model well understood first.
Okay. Yeah, that's great advice. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to kind of dive into this a little bit more hands-on and play around with these capabilities. It sounds really fun to me. So before kind of we wrap up here, I always like to ask, what is something you really want our customers to walk away with? This has all been really interesting. I love how easy it is to pick up your system, how it lets people be experts in what they're experts in. But kind of what's the main thing you want people to be walking away from this show today thinking about Brightspot?
I think the number one thing is just you can hit the ground running. The learning curve is not as bad as you think it is. You can pick up Java, you can pick up handlebars, you can pick up, um, uh, you know, JavaScript and CSS. You're probably already familiar with. So the number one takeaway is just that you should just try it out. It's easy, it's fun. Developers are happier when they're at their most productive. So if you want happy developers, you should find a way to make your developers productive.
Yeah, definitely want happy. You don't want upset developers on your team. Developers are where it's at, right, folks? All right. Well, we'll go ahead and make sure to drop a link to Brightspot in our comments here. So I encourage everybody to go ahead and click on it. I know I will play around with it, kind of learn everything that Lee's been talking about today. Lee, thank you so much for coming on our show. I've been so excited having you on and being able to talk to you more about this stuff. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer. But we'll go ahead and sign off. Thanks for joining us, Lee.